Hi, everybody. Welcome to the hopefully very first annual BlaQ OUT tea session as part of the BlaQ OUT Festival here based out of Portland, Oregon. My name is Shareen Jabobs. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a member of the Fuse board, which is the company helping hosting this, as well as the facilitator / moderator for this. I apologize for my inexperience with this. This is my first time, so please be gentle. Today, I am happy to have with me today our wonderful playwrights and I'm sorry, James, I don't know your exact title for this. Would you?
I'm the producing artistic director for BlaQ OUT. It's new,
so many words. Yes,
it takes a while.
Yeah, great, because I did not know those words myself.
Neither did I.
Great. So everyone, I hope you have your beverage of choice settle in and let's begin our tea session. So I wanted to start out with each of our writers. If you would please introduce yourselves and maybe tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. So I will go ahead and let's just start in order of the plays in which they were streamed. I think I had this here at one point, but I believe it's Jarrett is our first writer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Hello. I'm
Hello.
Jarrett McCreary. I am a playwright in Philadelphia. I use he, they pronouns. What else about me? I write a lot of Black queer stuff. It tends to be full of magic and trying to figure out how to be vulnerable in this crazy world. And yeah, that's sort of what I do. I'm also a copywriter for the job that gives me money, but I've been climbing my way through the playwriting world for a while now. So
Fantastic.
to be here.
Great. Thank you, Jarrett. Happy to have you here. Roger, would you go ahead, please?
Oh, sure. My name is Roger Q. Mason. I go by they, them pronouns. I am from Los Angeles, but I consider myself to be a bi-coastal writer because I'll go where the money is and where the work is.
Sure.
Honey, you said it's a tea session, so
yes,
it's gonna start spilling. And the work that I write is really centered on what I call historical fantasia, because I'm interested in imagining pasts and futures for Black queer bodies that the world didn't afford them. And so what I'm interested in doing is using the theater as a ritual of reimagining who we are and what's afforded to us. And if we can do it through the ritual of performance, then we can manifest it in the world.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for being with us here today. Okay, Rachel, thank you for being with us. Would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, that's really hard to follow, but I will. Hi, I'm Rachel Lynett. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I am originally from Los Angeles. Where I am right now doesn't matter. I won't be here in August. For the plays I write, I just really love writing about messy queer women of color. That's what I love to write about because we don't get to have those stories. No one lets us have those stories. I like to write about Black joy, specifically queer Black joy. And yeah, I try to tell myself that I write stories that I didn't see on stage, but would have helped me a lot. So I also specifically write about the Afro-Latinx and Latin experience as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yay. We're happy to have you. Thank you so much. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the plays a little more specifically. So let's just have a little chat, I guess, about your experience writing some of these stories and why this story and why now. Can we get into that? And I don't want to do this in any particular order. I kind of want to let people be where they are. So, but I will
Brought to
call on
you,
somebody. But I will
brought to
call
you.
on somebody.
I can start.
Okay.
You go, Jarrett.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I feel like your question is actually like a very weird question. It's a question that I keep having because this play, The Children of Edgar and Nina, is actually like what I consider my first official play. I wrote it years ago. And I think the biggest thing for me that's this most special part about it for me is that I tend to write starting in like scenarios or circumstances. And so I just sort of had this idea of a story where, you know, a character gets met with this unstoppable force and it changes their life, and then the person disappears for some reason. And I just had that idea for a while. I couldn't figure out how to do it. And then in college, we were doing the brother sister plays by Jarrett McCreary. We were doing all three of them, and it was the first time where something clicked in my head, and I was like, why can't my characters all be Black? Why can't they all be these beautiful, complex Black characters? And then suddenly the play was just born. But the reason why I say this is a question I have right now is because I wrote this years ago. It was for a while. It was the only play that I had under my belt that I was willing to give to the world, and for a really long time, no one wanted it. No one wanted to see it, and I was just like, no one is going to want this like Black queer love story. And then in the past like 3 years, people have just been like, I want to see this. I want people to read it. I want to produce it. And I think I've been having this question now, like, why now? Why suddenly has this, you know, really just love story been able to translate to people? And I'm hoping it's because, you know, more people who want that kind of representation and want those stories are in power in places to like give that, you know, voice and amplification. But it's a thing that I'm constantly wondering too, because I literally right before people started asking me about this, I was like, no one's gonna want to hear this. No one wants the story anymore. And I think it's just gonna have to sit in the archives. And maybe when I get rich and famous, I'll be like, do this because I have money and you have to. And so it's really exciting to like to be able to share this.
Thank you.
I'll continue the tradition and order that you started. So the play that's being presented as part of this festival is called The White Dress, and I started that play in 2014 when I was living in Chicago doing the MFA program at Northwestern, and I was sort of haunting between Evanston, the suburbs where the school is, and the city where life is. And I saw for the first time a gender neutral bathroom. And I had never seen such a contrivance before in my life, but it made me question, well, I never felt comfortable in that urinal and that pissy stall with all of these men grunting and protecting some identity held in a groin. And so, but the other side of the fence, the feminine presenting side of me, has never been really completely embraced. And so it was really at that point in time that I started understanding that I lived in some liminal space in between the two, which would later become known quite wonderfully and widely as gender queer, gender fluid, gender non-binary. But to see that possibility for myself, that there could be a third place, a place that did not assign one thing or another, was liberating for me spiritually, because it now gave me a home where I could nurture myself finally. And I thought about all of the years that I had fought against, through, in spite of that identity. And I worked through, look how inarticulate I am for once, because that's how you know it's real. Because when you write something that personal, you can't describe it. It's just this sublime feeling. But basically, I had to write a play that was a letter of amplification to my 8-year-old self, to let that child know that they were just fine the way they were. And that the 20 some odd years after that were not a waste, but my goodness, we hear you and we see you and we acknowledge the journey, and damn all the people that tried to naysay along the way. And that's really where the play started, and the rest kind of, you know, it went through various iterations in New York and Chicago and LA, but it started as a letter to my 8-year-old self saying, you're going to be all right, child.
Beautiful. Thank you.
For my play, I just kind of want to back up and just talk about all of my plays, and then I'll talk about apologies.
Okay, of course.
Because it's just for me, like when I think about queerness, I think that like every time we read a play, they never have to say they're straight, right? That's just the assumption. But the queer person is to be like, hello, and their rainbow colors, with their hair, like, here I am, right? And so I was just like, no. So just a rule of my plays is you assume everyone's queer unless they say they're straight. And I make the straight characters announce their straightness, but I don't do that with my queer characters. And so since that's just a rule of my work, all of my work is to me just inherently, aggressively, intentionally queer. So apologies for me was like, I wanted to talk about queerness, and I wanted to talk about what does it mean to be Black? How do we define it in the United States? And so what made me want to write it was I went to a talk led by a white woman about a Black artist, and she kept talking about the Black experience. And I was like, interesting. And the way she was describing the Black experience, I was like, that's not my experience. Am I not Black? And so that's what then led me to write Apologies to Lorraine Hansberry, You Too, August Wilson.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, because Jarrett kind of led into this a little bit. So we were talking about how this past year has been so impactful for many of us. So with that came from a lot of different arenas, urgency about how our politics, I guess we could say, and theater converge. So let's talk a little bit about how those changes have affected you, especially as it relates to the arts. And what are some of the things maybe that you are hoping to see changed, or that you would want to ask from people that are aspiring to be change artists?
I'll start this one to break the cycle. Does that sound good? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
I had high hopes around this time last year. It felt like a lot of things were going to change. So I'm going to talk about what my hopes still are, even though I feel like I have been shown what's going to happen. My hope is still I want to see more Black-led theater companies. I want to see more Black people getting support. Like right now, they're getting in the rooms, they're getting the titles, but they're not getting any support. Problem. I want to see more artist-led collectives taking the power back from these boards who aren't artists and don't care about anything but money. And yeah, I've always wanted that, and this last year just made me want it even more, because I think that we saw when we all went to Zoom, we saw this is accessible now. We all can do this. And it really felt like theater was catching up with the artists, because the artists were like, cool, awesome, I got to make that money. Like, y'all can do your furlough, whatever plans. I'm about to make my money. And then theater was like, oh, we can do theater on Zoom. Like, and they were following us for a bit, you know? And I wish that that energy would continue, because I think theater could be really radically changed if they would just let the artists lead, because they started following us for a year and we got to do some really amazing things because of it. I won't take up all the time, but those are my big hopes.
I'm gonna build from there, and I'm gonna continue a thought that I started on another panel yesterday, because I love what you're saying, Rachel, about artist-led visions of production and of work generation. And in order to do that, we have to completely change the paradigm of the country, because we are a product-based country, not a people-based country. So see, a board that's interested in maintaining a certain level of power and influence and generating income to maintain a bottom line is reflective of a power-based culture, which is what we are. But what you're calling for, quite intelligently so, is a people-centered business, which means you go to the artist first and say, what is it that you would like to make? And what resources do you need in order to make it? My God, what if we actually did that? I think we get some good shit out of it. Am I allowed to say curse on this shit? If I'm not, I did it just now. Because that's the truth. You said it was a tea. You said it was tea.
It
Hey, honey,
is.
say it.
You know,
Say it.
so my hope is, the first part of the question is what this year has been. What this year has been is it actually made people accessible to each other and to themselves, because we were all at home. So the gatekeepers had no excuse but to answer your email, because they sitting at home baking cookies, because we saw your Instagram. So don't play like you too busy in a meeting to answer my call. You're not. That cookie looked good though. Can I get the recipe real quick? And that's how you get in there. You slide into that DM, and then that conversation comes out of that. But so I think we became more human. Now the question becomes, will we maintain that humanity and that humility? How many people learned something on their Corona journey? And how many people are so glad to go back to business as usual? That's the question. We don't know. The jury's out on that. We're going to have to come back next year and ask that again and see. But my hope and my prayer is that enough people had a positive, transformative, and humility-based, community-based Corona journey, that they're still willing to have that conversation and still willing to put people first after we come out of this for real, for real.
Yeah, I think that the journey is is so interesting, because I think with going through COVID, and I say through on purpose because we're not done, but I think it really, for me, amplified this hill that I will always die on, which is that, and it's funny, I actually had to write, I'm making a presentation for another thing, and I actually wrote this in the presentation, which was, any marginalized group celebrating is a political act. And I think that what bothers me about a lot of theater, specifically where I live, but nationally, whatever, what bothers me a lot of times is that they want me as a Black queer playwright to teach white people something with my work. And so if it's not, dealing with very like heightened political situations or issues, the fact that I didn't write something about George Floyd's death, because forgive me for, mourning, I didn't create art out of it, then it's not good enough. And it's not going to be seen or produced or anything like that. And I think you asked the question of like, what would you, want to give to people who want to make change? It's, if you are a part of a marginalized group, if you are a part of a minority, you are change, all of you. And I think I try to embody that in my work. Like, I want to have, queer Black people who save the world and the galaxy and fight dragons and make love and go to Trader Joe's and get, JoJo Oreo cookies because they're delicious. Like, there's so many facets of us that are so important and beautiful and quirky and interesting. And those things are always questioned when they don't come out of a white voice. Because if you're not on stage to teach me, why are you here? And I think that is just something that I will fight forever. Of just like, no, I'm just gonna have interesting Black people on stage. Hope that's okay. They're probably gonna be gay because I wrote it. But that's all I got for you. And I'm hoping that that's enough for you to go, this is interesting and important. And there are cultural nuances just because they're Black people on stage. It's already embedded in the system. So let's just support it.
Shareen, can I do something real quick on that? Let me just say this. The issue is this. We are still seen as 3/5 of a person. Mm. The issue is that culturally we have a problem in this country with supporting and amplifying the multi-dimensionality and complexity of Black life. And its sole function in the majority gaze is to explain itself. We ain't writing no slave narratives no more where we proving our humanity to you. And we don't need to be cultural ambassadors so that you feel comfortable in your positionality in our lives or your ability to look on it. In other words, we are not here to be culturally comfortable for you. Mm-hmm. You need to sit in your discomfort. Why are we so estranged to you? Why are you so segregated philosophically, culturally, geographically that you need some tour guide to explain Blackness and Black life? That ain't my problem. And me explaining it to you, truth be told, won't be the solution, because that has to come from the culture. That's not our job. And we should not have to bear the burden of that civic labor.
I love where this conversation's going. I started working with Fuse a little over a year and a half ago, and we staged Booty Candy, and Shareen was in the show. We had beautiful audiences. There were laughs every night, and I'm like, wow, this is great. We've got all the right people in place. But it took 5 years. It took me 5 years to get someone to want to produce this, and Fuse is the perfect place for that, being a queer theater. Even post Booty Candy, the award nominations and board members coming in to praise it. I went to go. I met with other producers around town, and our audiences aren't ready, or oh, we can't do that here. Or I was like, well, you have to get them ready. You have to prioritize them. And I think when George Floyd died last year, I was just really exhausted. I'm an empath, and like I was exhausted for already I was already baseline exhausted, but all of my white friends wanted to reach out, and that was exhausting. And then all the white theater creators, and I love them, that are watching, but like, we got to do this. You got to get out and guerrilla theater. Like, no, I wanted to rest. So, I was like, fuck all y'all. I'm sleeping. Fuck theater. I mean, with the Capitol riots happening, like, fuck theater. I don't want to do this anymore. But there's liberation and protest and resting too, and I took that time to do that and regroup. And I feel now that we're doing this, I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. I'm in the room. I've been on these boards before. I've been on these grant panels before. What's different this time? What's going to be different? Rachel, when you spoke a bit ago, I'm like, yes, I'm feeling that tea. What's different this time? What's going to be different? I don't really know, but for this festival, there are 2 directors who are Black and queer who never directed before. Yes. There are actors in this that had never had an opportunity to play within their identities. Yes, that's what we want to do. Jarrett, I'm happy to produce your play. Rachel, Roger, I'm happy to put your play on. That's what I can do right now. And I'm hoping that there's more actors and artists that are willing to say no, because we don't always give ourselves permission to say no to the people that aren't doing the work that let us sit naturally within our bodies. So I'm hoping for more of that. I'm hoping for more dollars, dollars with a slow walk away, so I can take my money and do what I want to do with it without having you tell me how to run what we do. That's what I'm looking for more of. So just want to put that out into the universe. Ooh, I felt that in my bones.
That last part, boo. That last part.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sitting, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I'm just breathing. I had to take a
Sit in
breath.
that for a moment and, let those dollars flow in. Remember, people, put your money where your mouth is. So, let's see. What do we talk about now? About how much time do you think we have, James?
We've got, let's just run it till we're done,
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Um, actually, James, I did want to ask you, since you're on the panel, what made you choose these particular stories for this first festival here?
Ooh, that's a hefty one. When we were trying to, at the beginning, it was just me trying to figure out what a Black Queer Festival would look like. Um, when looking for mentors, Rusty is an amazing mentor. Rusty happens to be white. And when Rusty's in a space, they're just like, my white ass. And like, okay, but you're still my mentor. It was hard to find other Black queer mentors. So I had to get on Zoom, and I was Zooming kids from Mississippi, from Alabama, and finding out, just like the folks in this room, that it was hard to find a strong foundation for us to work from. So it kind of made me feel better. I was like, I don't know what to do. I was like, we don't either. We just got to get our hands dirty and figure it out, right? So in lieu of that conversation about George Floyd, one thing that really is really important to me is, like, if you're going to produce theater, a lot of folks are having these anti-racist statements. Why? Like, you need to have a clear intention for why this story, why now. And one thing I didn't want to do is anything that was math normative or cis male normative. Blackness has many shades, queerness has many shades. So these different plays, I love how many queer men are in Rachel's plays. I love how Roger's play makes me question my own masculinity. I played Theo, by the way. And I was like, that hit me in my womb, which I don't have. It just hit me. I was like, it's just, there's so many conversations, right? Black queer love, we don't get a lot of opportunities to have Black queer love. I just got engaged to my Black queer husband, fiance this year, and I'm like, yeah, baby, we're doing this. There's power in that. So that's what resonated me with each of these plays. Just those themes of having someone watching these shows and seeing a bit of themselves in these people, or seeing someone in their lives that will make them want to talk more, ask more questions, and think critically about how we're interacting with the world and how much space we take up and how much space we allow others to take up. That's what really hit home with me with these plays. So thanks for asking that. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about your plays, because I do have some specific questions for each of our playwrights about their plays. Let me go ahead and start with, I have something specific for you, Rachel. We'll get back to you here in a second, but I wanted to kind of talk to you, Roger and Jarrett specifically, because I did notice a couple things in reading your plays that really jumped out for me. In your play, Roger, I noticed in your character descriptions that you spelled out some of the needs and motivations of these characters. Whereas by contrast, Jarrett, your characterizations have very little identifying data at all in there about your characters. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how that affects what the interpretations of your hope for the interpretations of your work, and how people may receive that work.
A script is a blueprint for a larger event to be manifested in the great temple of the theater. And at a certain point, you give it over to other people. It does not always belong to you. At some point, it belongs to the world. And there's a generosity and a selflessness and an egolessness and a trust involved with that process. So when you create, whether it's character descriptions or stage directions, all of these elements which help to sort of frame the aesthetic of the piece, what I've learned over time, and of course that's an earlier play of mine, so my aesthetic and my approach to dramatis personae expression has changed a little bit since then. But at that time, I was very interested in what characters needed from each other, because I thought, that would be the most playable way of casting. Because at that time, there weren't as many self-identified folks who fit the demographics of the piece. This was 2014, 2015. I was dreaming of a world that would take another several years. And so what you can do is you can describe what people need. And the essence of human need is what will carry you through a particular play as an actor. So that was sort of why I did it that way. Now, how has it changed from production to production or between interpretations? I think that's really the magic of production, is it tests the aesthetic elasticity of your work, because there's certain things that will always be constant. There's certain marks that most people will hit in a particular way because the blueprint indicates it. But there's certain other things where you get taught something. And I think that's really the beauty of the opportunity to learn through production, is sometimes an actor or a stage, a director or a designer, they'll teach you. And I invite and I love that moment, because that's what we live for, is to learn. And if we're not always learning and growing as artists, we're dead.
Thank you.
Yeah, same feelings, honestly. That came with the opposite result. I wanted to be an actor before I switched over to playwriting. Fully, I had always been writing, but I had my little Broadway dreams of like, oh, I'm gonna be an actor and I'm gonna go to New York and be on Broadway. That ain't happened, but but I think and also I'm a theater educator as well. I think what that taught me was really this beautiful way of playing, and of giving the people who are working on this with you the ability to play and navigate and be inspired, and that mirrors and inspires you. I always say one of my dreams is I want to write for TV. One of my dreams for writing for TV is that I want the internet to ship two people who will never be together and yell at me about it. I just want someone to be in my DMs just to be like, you're wrong, because these people, look at them, how they stare each other in their eyes, they love each other. And like, the reason why is because I'm like, okay, this has inspired, like, you are seeing something in this and it is growing within you, and that's amazing. And I think that's part of the reason why I write all of my character descriptions like that. I want to give like a little nugget of information, and then I want to see what you do with it. And a lot of times, so many times, when I see what you've done, so much of that goes back into the play, and I'm like, okay, cool, that's canon now. Like, that's the thing that we do, because you like gave this beautiful, extra piece. Like, I remember I did a reading of this before as an example. This isn't character based, but I did a reading of this before, and the person who was directing it was like, I'm thinking about music with this, and I was like, oh yeah, cool, like set up a Spotify playlist, girl, like get yourself together. And then they came in with a celloist, and I was like, oh, this is in this forever now. Like, this, if you are producing this play, there is a celloist on, like, this is lit. Like, it was this beautiful moment where I was just like, oh, this is great, because you saw or heard something or felt something in this, and I really want that for the characters. I never want those characters. There are moments that, like Roger said, there are moments that feel the same, and they hit me even as the writer in the same way every time. But everything else, I want to feel the choices that you make. And if my little like piece of information can guide you there, great. But like, I don't want to put too much on it, because like, you're the actor, go do something really cool and like come back to me about it.
Thank you for that. Rachel, I am lucky enough to be playing a character in your play. And I did want to ask you a little bit about kind of the evolutionary process, first of all, in the play and then in the larger aspects about your work. So, in the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about specifically in the world of your play is the kind of the shift between the first part and the second part. So in the very first part of it, we are very centered about the question of Blackness. That is very much front and center in the first part of the play. But it kind of takes a little bit of a seeming backseat in the second part. Could you kind of talk a little bit about that that shifting of focus there?
I can. And to be fair to everyone on the panel, I'll be brief. I so part one used to be a lot longer. Not a lot, but a little bit longer. Part one used to go all the way where I'm curious on who you're playing. No, part one used to go all the way where Yael was actually like in jail, and she was in Isaac's jail, and like there was like these really cool split scenes. And a lot of white artistic directors, and why don't they step down? A lot of them were like, we really like part one a lot. Like, can you just get rid of part two and just expand on part one? Because we really want to see, like, this is such an interesting question. Like, policing within the Black community is not something I've seen before. It's always policing on. And I was like, oh no, white people are going to walk away from this and go, Black people do it too. I'm fine. So I was like, no, white people, you sneaky sneakies. So I made part one even shorter to lengthen part two. And to me, again, part one it is a lot more to the forefront, but it's still there in part two. And I think if you look at the step out scenes, it's even louder in part two. But I just chose to focus on Black queer families. And it's like, we are also still part of the conversation of what counts as Blackness. And so that's why that pivot, one of the reasons why that pivot happens is I love part two. If I were to do anything, I'd get rid of part one and expand part two. But I've had so many people say, oh, now I get it. I'm like, no. And so that's why there is that sharp pivot of like, also to me, the play is constantly, I promise to be brief, so I'm almost done. The play is constantly deconstructing itself because it's impossible for one Black person to define Blackness, and that's kind of the point of the play. So I also just kind of wanted to keep showing that, like it's almost, to me, it's like a balling up of the paper and being like, let me try again. Crap, I can't do it. So that's part of the part one, part two divide there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would have to say that as far as I play Alice in the play, I did want to see more of part two. I really did want to see some more because in many ways, I think as a Black person, I thought that was a more interesting question than the beginning piece of it. But moving back to evolution, Rachel, I still wanted to kind of talk to you about this, and then we can expand it a little more to the group. In theater plays and things like that, we're kind of having a conversation of actor to audience and viewer and participants. And so I was wondering, as you write and as you produce and perform works, as you see it, what kind of, I guess, evolutionary journey are you hoping that people can have or take from your work as they are witnessing or participating in? What is it that you're hoping that kind of journey might look like for somebody in this conversation that you're having with them or whomever you're having it with?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, was that a lot?
So I feel like I'm on my own evolutionary journey of my work. It's interesting because everybody wants to do my old plays. I'm really happy that people are drawn to apologies. My old plays were a lot like, let's have fun. And my plays now are like, we need to talk. So for me, like, I think plays should be playful. I think they should be fun. I think they should engage the audience. I think that's a really big part that sometimes I think we forget about. So to me, it's like, I think that every good play has a really solid surprise, has a gasp moment, has a lean forward moment, has a like where you want to rewind but you can't because it's live. And so that is what my plays are, I'm trying to get my plays that evolutionary point where you kind of maybe have to watch it twice. You're going to miss something. It comes at you fast. There's a moment you're going to be like, wait, can we rewind that moment? I'm actually thinking about creating a moment of rewind in a play that I'm working on right now. And so for me, the journey that I want to go on the audience is I want their attention. I think people come theater, they're very passive, like they like barely turn off their phones. They've got the screens on low. They're like texting from the corner, they've got to pee. Like they just came here because they're like one artsy friend dragged them here. They came from the bar. Like, and I want it to not be that. Like for me, it's like I want theater to go back to being the first show I saw was a full body experience. Like it lived in my body days after I saw it. And which is embarrassing now because I'm not going to tell you what the show was, but it did. It like radically did. And I think that's what theater should do. And so that's the relationship that I'm trying to create with my audience is I want them to be thinking about my plays even when they're not trying to. Like I want them to just come up in their brains and then hopefully, I mean, we've been trying for years, that will make them be better people. But I mean, at this point, like just remember the play. I mean, like turn your phone off for 2 hours. Like my standards are dropping, but that's what I want.
Thank you, Rachel. Jarrett, actually, do you want to go ahead and maybe weigh in on this a little bit?
Yeah, I'm trying to think because I think similar to Rachel, where like I'm also going on my own journey as I write more. I feel like each play gets progressively blacker and queerer as I go on. And I also wanted to point out that I love an inspiration out of spite. That's one of the greatest strengths that everyone could ever muster. And you just be like, no, I'm actually going to go the opposite way because fuck you. And then making something amazing out of it is great. But yeah, I don't know. I think I try, and I don't think I did this on purpose, but I think now that I know this is the train that I'm on, I really embrace it, that my plays really, really talk about intimacy and really unpack intimacy between anyone, but specifically between Black queer people. And I think that's probably, me trying to work that out in myself. But, I think on one hand, it's definitely this idea of, Black queer people are multifaceted and have different stories to tell, and different internal journeys. It's not just about the oppressive system that we live in. We all know that we live in that. There's nuance and inner workings that should be unpacked and noticed and honored. And I think that's something that I really, really love. And I just hope that people can take that away and just understand that like that's a part of us, and it's a beautiful part of us that should be shown. I think one of the connectors I always think about when I think about something that is inherently Black and is not apologetic about it is Living Single, which is like my favorite sitcom of like all time. But because it's about 6 friends who live in the middle of 90s Brooklyn, so there's no question of Blackness here. There's no question about what it means to be Black here within us. Sometimes there's a question of the outside, but there's never a question within the people who are talking on screen. And I want to create that. And I hope that more people want that in a similar way. Through this conversation, the nuances and the cultural significance of this conversation, if there is universality, but both should be respected. Both the like, oh, I get this because I too struggle with these emotions. And I also don't get all of this because these, characters are Black and they have their own journey, and I'm acknowledging that and honoring that space for them, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. Roger, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I stopped calling them plays. I stopped calling them plays because they're not plays, because I'm not playing with you. I'm not playing with you. We are here to conjure a ritual. The subject is your soul's transformation. And by the time you leave this room, something will be stirred. And I think we need to develop new literacies around plays. So the issue is that we view and we judge work on a two-dimensional literary scale. We read a play, and therefore we form an opinion about that play based on what we read. And in the process of doing so, we forgot that it is a blueprint for a performance work. So there's something about potentiality that we don't read, because you see, what you should be reading, in my opinion, is not just what's on the page, but what that indication on the page is inspiring you to dream after. What design elements, what relationship to time and space and diction and body is this giving you permission to explore? So part of what I've done is I've stopped calling them plays, and I've also contrived these very, I'll call them obtuse, although they're probably not as obtuse as I think they are. What do you call it? Formatting. So that when you look at the piece, you know from the beginning, this is not a final draft, edited piece, because final draft comes with a certain connotation that this is a piece written on a program that holds with it the expectation of a linear cause and effect cisgender male story. So I now need to get you out of that so that you can come into my world, because my world is justified to the left, and my world has line breaks, and my world has poetic stage directions where we talk to you and we cuss you out. Because you're not on your phone. Listen, Rachel, they ain't on their phones, and you better not have your phone. Didn't your mama tell you not to use your phone while you was in class? You better not. I see your ass. I got a box at the door. Put your phone in the motherfucking
And put
box.
your Apple phone on theater mode so it
your
don't
Apple-
flash while you're waving around.
You can't be on your phone unless you tweeting about me and helping me sell some tickets. Now, if you do it, but to answer your question, the evolution for me has been giving myself permission to embrace the fact that I am writing both in content and in form things that are interested in dreaming our craft forward. And I have to indicate that in the blueprint. I've learned that you have to indicate that in the blueprint, because from page one, from the frontispiece on, people are developing an opinion and an understanding, and you need to dissociate them from what's comfortable.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Looks like we have maybe about 5 minutes-ish left. Is that where we're at? I think, yeah, however long. Okay. So I think we are starting to wind down here. So I have two more questions I want to ask you all. The first is more general. Where can people find you and your work, or follow you in your work if you'd like them to? If you want to be found. You might not want to be, but.
Yeah, you can. Well, all my plays are on New Play Exchange. I feel like that's where most people tend to find my work. I have all the social medias, but that's not for everybody. However, I do have an Instagram at BlaQ McCreary, and I tend to try to update that as well with my work. But New Play Exchange is very pretty. It's very pristine with all my things on it.
I'll go next. I have a website. It's rogerqmason.com, and it has a lot of the things on it, but not everything. And for some of my more esoteric thoughts, I am known to go crazy on Instagram, and I'm at rogerq.mason on Instagram, and then I'm also Roger Q Mason on Facebook as well.
I'm also on New Play Exchange. All the plays that I let people read are there. The others, you won't find them. Although one theater company found one, I still don't know how. So I do have a Facebook, but that's for my rants. So no, thank you. And I have an Instagram, but that's for my cats. So it's either New Play Exchange or RachelLynett.com. I need to update my website, but that has a great, if you want to just contact me directly, going through my website is the best way to do it.
James, do you want to put where you can be found or no?
I'm at jamesrdixon.com. So yeah, it's my website too needs to be updated. But once this festival has wrapped up, I will get right on that. But yeah,
It's hard trying
jamesrdixon.com.
to find somebody to help with these websites. Let me tell you.
Oh my God. I think someone brought up like what would be a magical thing if I had someone that was here to do everything outside of this room for me while I do this, it would be magic, but that's not how it works. We ain't got that kind of money. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Sounds like there is a definite need. If there's maybe some theater people who do websites, maybe some people to talk to. So let's go on to our final. I promise mostly that this is our final question. And this question, thanks to you, Rachel, at the end of your play, you have the cast reflecting on this question. And I would like each of you to hopefully maybe leave a little of that, answer that into this space. What does Blackness mean to you?
I guess I'll go first, since I did this to us. I think about this moment a lot. I know I need to answer the question, but I also want to address the moment. I think about this moment a lot of like, I really want it to be this like really freeing moment. And I'm also very conscious of the fact that a lot of audiences are white and that Black actors have said that they don't want to define it in front of white audiences because it's not for them. And so saying all of that, for me, Blackness is something that is sacred. It's a celebration and it's joy. That's what Blackness is to me. And then there's also what Blackness has been told to me is, and I'm not addressing that. But for me, it's joy. It's a celebration, and it's about being deeply, deeply connected to, or at least I feel very deeply connected to my ancestors and the people before me, and the things that they've done to get me where I am today. So that's what it is to me.
You better do it.
I can go next. Or you can go next.
Mm-mm.
um, I think Blackness for me is joyful and multifaceted and resilient. I think resilient is something that keeps hitting me lately. Just because I've been thinking about how time works in a way that we cannot comprehend in our like 75 average lifespan, that like we were cut off from our history and then hundreds of years later we made multiple new ways of not only thriving but also inherently connecting back to our culture. The fact that there are just like drums and chanting in ancient African dances and Caribbean dances and ballroom houses, like that's just resilience. That is just powerful resilience that we can't even comprehend, let alone somebody else. So I think that is the word that strikes to me in this moment.
The word that strikes me is complexity. And I think that Blackness affords us permission and a fortification from the ages to be as complex and as interdisciplinary and as complicated and as messy and as wonderful as we fucking want to be. And we don't have to explain it or defend it or define it for anyone because it is omniscient and omnipresent. We have been, we are now, we will be. And for me, knowing that, especially as somebody who's had to go on a whole journey of self-definition and self-love, to just know that I have all of that working with me, marching with me through this life, gives me all of the strength I need to survive everything. because they've survived. They survived it because I'm here. The bloodline didn't end. They didn't cut us off. That one man hanging from a tree that they castrated so that his offspring would never come back. They didn't succeed. They did not succeed because we are still here. Every toe, every eyeball, every soul, we're still here. And that's the power of Blackness.
Man, okay, full disclosure, I brought forth this question for the discussion. And it's so weird because I don't know what to say fully, about this. I just thinking about it in real time right now. For most of my career, I'm usually in white spaces, surrounded by white folks, and I rarely get to be Black and queer in the same space, and it makes me fucking crazy. Uh, really crazy. So, I mean, especially, I think, thinking about this question right now, I think I'm redefining it for myself in the past year and even right now. And for now, Blackness means, me not having a code switch if I don't feel like it. Blackness means, me bringing some faggot girl, butch queen realness to the room if I want to, especially when I'm in Black spaces. When we're talking about the revolution, we're talking about Black Lives Matter. That doesn't always include Black folks in this space, It's Black, but we ain't about that faggot shit, So like, and y'all know what I'm saying, right? So like Blackness is multifaceted, and Blackness is something very personal. The power of self-identification is so, I love being able to self-identify. I'm not like every Black person. Yes, I'm articulate. Yes, I'm educated. That's not me talking white. I'm still Black, So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it at that. I can go on for a minute, but yeah. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that and bringing this into the space. I want to go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you again. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us. Jarrett McCreary, author of The Children of Edgar and Nina, Roger Q. Mason, author of The White Dress, and Rachel Lynett, author of Apologies to Lorraine Hainsberry, and you too, August Wilson. And again, to our artistic producing director, sure. I think those words in some order, James Dixon. Again, my name is Shareen Jabobs, and I hope that you enjoyed this, hopefully first of many BlaQ OUT tea sessions. Have a great day, everyone.